Hello, folks, and welcome to The Farm, a podcast dedicated to synchromysticism, parapolitics, and high weirdness in all its many forms. This is your host, Recluse, aka Stephen Snyder. As always, Frank Zero is with us on the astral plane. We have two guests today, and one of them is the reoccurring character of John Brisson of We've Read the Documents. Also with us today is Twitter personality Veltman, who's going to lend us his expertise on today's topic. Guys, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having us on, Recluse.
Yep. All right, so today we are going to talk about the curious figure of Corey Goode. About half a decade ago or so, he suddenly emerged as a major figure in the UFO community, renewing efforts to investigate the secret space program and to put his own spin on disclosure. Later, he would hook up with veteran conspiracy theorist David Wilcox, and together they would play a role in launching Gaia TV, now a staple of the New Age community. However, just as suddenly as Goode rose, he fell from grace. We're going to take a look at his meltdown and consider the potential dark side of Gaia and all of the affiliated personalities. So, let's get going, guys. All right, so first off, let's get into Corey Goode's rise and the whole phenomenon that kind of emerged around him. Lee, do you want to tackle that to start off with?
I first stumbled on these people about 5 years ago. I knew them as what was known as the Sphere Being Alliance more than anything else. Him and just like I said, I didn't really know them as a guy. I knew them as it was just David Wilcox, the Ancient Aliens, television show stuff.
Okay. John, did you have anything to add to that?
I've seen David Wilcox around in the conspiracy movement for a long time. Myself, and then I didn't recently know about Corey Goode until about 2 or 3 years ago when I happened to hear C.W. Chanter talk about Corey Goode. And I didn't know that he was working with Gaia TV and working with David Wilcox to discuss the secret space program, or them talking about their contacts with supposed extraterrestrial beings, the Blue Avians, and how that they are working to correct, issues that we've had here on the Earth, like the deep state cabal. And then David Wilcox and Corey Goode kind of pushing narratives of both being pro-Trump and Lee, don't get me wrong, also being pro Q2 as well, correct?
Oh, very mumuch so. With Gordon and those other people.
Yes. So them kind of pushing New Ageism mixed with like UFO cult type information. And David Wilcox has made many different claims throughout the years. I think he also mentioned that he, if I remember, channeled Edgar Casey. Would that be correctly? With Wilcox? I think he did. He used to say that.
But like I said, to say he channeled it isn't the correct truth. He says he is the reincarnation.
Oh, yeah, the reincarnation of Edgar Casey. Yes, that's a step above. You are correct. Thank you for correcting me on that. So, yes, he is a reincarnation of Edgar Casey.
And the Edgar Casey Foundation has come out against that stuff, so.
I would certainly hope so. That's really weird. Yeah. So, what is the whole rundown with Wilcox? Because he's certainly like a veteran conspiracy theorist. Do you guys know when he kind of broke into the scene and how this, his kind of ideology has evolved over the years?
With Wilcox, I've seen him for a long time. Ever since I remember I've been awake since back in 2009, and would see shortly after, during the 2010, you would see things come out about David Wilcox. Since then, people would discuss him showing up and then later being pushed forth, with the secret space program. Them pushing him forth on that and, putting him out everywhere. And, of course, with Q and Trump being pushed out, it seems that, he gained a lot of influence from there. What about you, Lee?
I just remember him back from the Ancient Aliens TV show stuff that I used to watch.
Which was on, which would come on
It was on the
History
Channel.
Channel.
I've always been into like the paranormal conspiracy woo stuff. So that's where there was Graham Hancock, Greg Braden, all those people. And so that's the more recent stuff. But the Ancient Alien TV show with all those other people, Brooks Agnew and Terry Cassidy and all those other people all connect to the current snafu that's going on right now. So a lot of people that have gotten into what I like to just term the UFOlogy community are starting to speak out against the people that don't have any proof is the best way to say it, I guess.
Yes. The more the speculative approach to it. So how did Wilcox and Corey Goode hook up with each other? Do you guys have like an idea of that? Okay.
Lee would probably have more information on that. Lee, do you remember the story as far as Wilcox and Corey Goode meeting with each other?
Well, it happened with Wilcox bringing Goode into the community. And then Corey Goode ran with his Blue Avians 20 and back story. And so a lot of people now believe there's jump rooms, bases on Mars, and the Pleiadian narrative that goes along with that stuff.
Now, that wasn't till around 2015. I remember. I think that's when it started, or slightly before then. 2014, 2015 was when Corey Goode was thrusted into that. When I remember hearing that he was thrusted into that nexus and being put forth. Was it supposedly Jay Weidner that pushed Corey Goode to the world firstly? Is that true?
See, Jay Weidner was working back with all of those people doing those documentaries back in the day. And so when the Jim lawsuit happened between them, and I do believe it was also involved Greer. And that case got dropped, so a lot of people were just left holding the bag and very confused. 2 years ago, I do believe.
So yeah, it's my belief that David Wilcox, from what I've heard, and Jay Weidner found Corey Goode, and pushed him to the forefront to help represent not Weidner specifically, but more David Wilcox, their whole Spirit of Being Alliance and deep space program, and then being pushed forth on Gaia TV.
Now, Weidner, he had kind of broken into all this, doing stuff on the films of Stanley Kubrick. Is that correct?
Very much so. The whole Hollywood Decoded, esoteric Hollywood work that Jay Dyer and him have been doing for years together very much plays into the narrative.
Okay, well then how did these guys get involved in the whole UFO stuff in the first place then? Do you happen to know, Lee?
It goes back to George Norrie and all them.
Okay, and who was George Norrie?
He has that podcast. Oh.
He was the host that took over for Art Bell and Coast to Coast AM.
Okay. Yeah, right.
We call him George Snorri. But yes, he took over from Art Bell, and was the lead host of Coast to Coast AM. And Coast to Coast AM have had many of these people over the numerous years on their show to because they would branch a lot of topics like woo topics like Bigfoot and aliens and everything.
Which is the assassination of JFK, Paperclip, MK Ultra, Big Pharma conspiracies, remote viewing. That stuff is what they mainly do work with.
Okay, and that was essentially then how the two J's essentially got kind of tied into all this UFO type stuff. Okay.
Yes, and being pushed forward through Gaia TV for content and everything. And Jay Weidner also had a show with Jay Dyer on Esoteric Hollywood on Gaia TV too as well, right, Lee?
Yeah, it's called Hollywood Decoded, where they break
Hollywood Decoded. That's right. Esoteric Hollywood was Jay Dyer's book. So.
Right. Well, he has a Hollywood one, Esoteric Hollywood one, and he's just published the second one. So that's kind of why he's been getting a lot of publicity lately.
And what was the genesis of Gaia TV? Can you guys kind of get into that a little bit? Like, Lee, do you want to start out with that?
Yeah, because I basically know the basics. I looked into this stuff yesterday to prepare for the show. Gaia's started back in '88, so 32 years ago in Boulder, Colorado, with Jerky
Wow.
Rayosky. And it was formerly known as Gaia. And so, like says, just like says, they have a bunch of videos on the side that have a lot to do with yoga, psychedelics, pseudoscience, French theories, conspiracy theories, and alternative medicine. And then they merged back in 2001 with Real Good Solar. And so in 2005, Gaia acquired also the media assets of Good Times Entertainment and Jetlags Productions. And then in 2003, the company bought 51.1% shares in the UK distributorship Leisure Systems International. And then in 2007, Gaia acquired both Lime.com and Zetas.com for a greater community presence.
And they were doing it to kind of, at first it was put forth as kind of being like a conscious consumer type group. Very similar that you could say to what was the Ralph Nader was trying to push, that consumers should be educated about their choices. And then later from there, it kind of went from them acquiring all these companies to do that to becoming, yoga, meditation type group in the late 2000s, early 2010s. And then from there being, moving to what it is today, mainly talking about secret space program and new age esoteric type philosophy is more of what Gaia TV has come when it transitioned from Gaia to Gaia. So it's very interesting that it kind of started as like a consumer advocacy type group and then kind of morphed into this conspiracy.
Alcohol,
network it is
Kundalini,
now.
mysticism, nutrition, Paleolithic diets. Like I said, they have covered. Because I, if I haven't followed them for so long, I wouldn't know all this information. And that's a lot of people might have a little bit of an issue with. I'm sitting there going, while everything they talk about isn't true, not everything they talk about is bad. But if you're drinking MMS bleach or overdosing on colloidal silver because of what these dudes are saying, you might need to back away from the social media networking out there.
Yes, absolutely. So I find that really interesting too, that it had its origins in Boulder. Of course, that's not very far from Denver, Colorado, which has obviously been the site of a lot of curious things over the years. And then a little south of that, about 2 hours or so or less, is Colorado Springs. Which is really ground zero for focus on the family and some of these more fanatical kind of dominionist aligned Christian cults and what have you. And of course, you have the whole NORAD facility and whatnot. Did you guys notice any kind of curious connections, possibly going back to the foundation of the company in the late '80s? Because certainly that's a very suggestive area of the country to be set up in.
Not offhand, Recluse. I mean, Jerka Rasavi, he was a Czech immigrant who started Gaia Television, but I couldn't really find anything back then from their beginning. It would just seem to be kind of like a consumer advocacy group. Very akin to kind of like what Ralph Nader was doing, is trying to give, inform consumers of their purchases. And it seemed to be started as that. Now you can argue, later we could talk about with the formation of Gaia TV and being very close to Coast AM, which holds a lot of people from the Council for National Policy on there, or Jay Weidner, who's gone on Jeff Rentz's show for numerous years. I mean, I used to, before I even knew Jay Weidner had anything to do with Gaia TV. I mean, I'm talking about, it's been 8-10 plus years. I started listening to Rentz, I think 2011 off and on. And Jade Weidner would be on there quite frequently. He still is. And so yeah, I mean there are definitely modern day ties, and I guess we can go more of that a little bit later to the secret right in that aspect. And of course, you have a lot of information with the Nine and how a lot of these quote unquote Christian groups like the CMP are strange bedfellows with people who believe in the secret space program or the noetic sciences or more of the esoteric New Age beliefs, which you think would be antagonistic to their beliefs, but they seem to push that. But from the very beginning, I didn't find anything that showed that was the front. This was some. It's weird how it just became consumer advocacy to New Age yoga to secret space program. Like it kind of like it evolved in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
So
absolutely. Well, like I said, and that's why I find it kind of strange that it was because I want to say Focus on the Family really started to take off in Colorado Springs, like around that same time frame, right? Like the late
yes,
80s or something, and that
yes.
was obviously the
Family.
top. Pardon me.
Which
The
family?
Focus on the Family. It's a Christian advocacy group. John,
I'm
you're
asking
probably.
very, because the family that you're talking about is different from the family documentary that came out on Netflix. Is all I'm trying to point out a little bit. That's all.
Yes, yes,
Oh yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
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 yes.
yes, yes.
And
No, no.
so John
There's
kind of went off on some tangents about things that don't really have much to do with Gaia and Denver and Colorado Springs and conspiracy
Well,
theory stuff.
them pushing stuff recently now they have been though. That's the thing, but not from its inception. Now.
Operation, maybe like Operation Jade Helm and some deep underground military bases stuff, maybe?
Yeah,
Okay.
which many people in the secret right like to push out there, conspiracy theorists and stuff like that, like Alex Jones. So
Well, I mean, I was kind of looking at it more in terms of the potential CNP ties as well, because I believe Focus on the Family did have some pretty extensive ties to the CNP, right, John?
yes, very much so.
Yeah, I
So,
agree with that. Very much so.
so yeah, I mean, it's just kind of interesting to me that you sort of have that kind of this kind of Christian network setting up in the south, and then on the north of Denver, you've got this kind of the genesis of this later New Age movement, all kind of roughly in the late 1980s. But obviously that would require some more research. But okay, so let's get back to Gaia then. So when did Corey Goode and Wilcox and the Jays and what have you really start to get hooked up with Gaia? And do you guys know how that necessarily came about as well? Was it just through like Coast to Coast AM or something like that?
Yes.
Yes, from them working with and being promoted by George Norrie, the History Channel, the whole Ancient Aliens phenomenon, boosting that too as well. And David Wilcox, and Jay Weidner were probably there. They were there before Corey Goode was. They kind of supposedly brought Corey Goode along in about 2015, 2016, from what I remember. So it wasn't too after 20. It's like so Gaia became Gaia in 2015, and before then they were still just mainly working on just putting out yoga and meditation like type videos when they changed their name. But once they became Gaia, that's when they really started to promote the secret space program and the Sphere Being Alliance and more of the esoteric woo woo new age type videos and stuff like that full force from then on. I mean, they started having Graham Hancock on, Bruce Lipton, um, many people that you see within the same nexus. They were doing, I think they held an event in 2019. I think somewhere in Kentucky. That was live streamed. That I remember watching Hancock and Lipton speak, because a lot of people love Bruce Lipton because he seems to be one of the modern day gurus of pushing for the power of positive thinking and belief and self will, but from a more scientific standpoint, scientific in quotation marks. So they're pushing a lot of that forward that you see with Gaia TV doing that. Some better, some worse. For worse, but it seems that they seem to be pushing that stuff very heavily. So.
Okay. Well, okay, and so I've also heard that Goode's ideology and potentially also that kind of underlining Gaia as well is a lot of overlap with the so-called Law of One or the raw materials, which is a series of texts I believe that were supposedly channeled in the early 1980s in Louisville, Kentucky, by a group called the L&L Research or something to that effect. Lee, could you get into potential links between the Law of One and the raw materials to Gaia and Corey?
Of course. That's all very recent news that's been coming out that also connects with Jay-Z Knight, who channels Ramtha. So the Law of One, Ra, and Ramtha now connect to that stuff that also connects with something called The Secret or A Course in Miracles.
Also that would be also the law of attractions as well, correct?
That is correct. It's kind of hard to talk about these topics with people because they don't realize how multi-millions of dollars are invested in these, UFO conferences, book sales, speaker engagements, etc.
So you're saying Go ahead.
Like I said, that's when I'm trying to think of the documentary they tried to put out last year that it was a flop. Above Majestic. That was the name of it. So.
Yes, Above Majestic.
And so, that's when I really noticed how big the resistance to these people was getting to be. And so that's when my friend Groovy Bean started speaking out. She was at right after the eclipse, there was a convention in Mount Shasta that I almost went to. But these people charge $222 or $333 for their Ascension classes right now online. So when she started speaking out against them, they started gang stalking and harassing her to the point where she's completely getting help and had to get offline because of the threats she was receiving. And a lot of stuff started happening with other people that were connected to all this stuff. And like I said, I don't want to get off into the Pizzagate stuff since it does connect with this stuff right now, and so many people are in legal battles over this stuff. So it's very hard to discuss without upsetting a lot of people who are very vested in this narrative not being exposed.
Okay, so okay, well, one question I wanted to ask you. So you said there was a lot of money being poured into this. Are you saying something like The Secret, where they had what was it, the documentary that came out during the last decade, in the book that kind of corresponded with it, or maybe it was the other way around? Are you saying that was getting a certain amount of backing from corporate sponsors or something to that effect?
Oh yeah. Big time. Like I said, there's so many people with Carrie Cassidy and Avalon Project and the Basis Project with Miles Johnson and Stuart Swirlow and Simon Parks that all have, like I said, as if the secret space program that they've been pushing for 20 years now was exposed as completely fake and not real. They can't keep doing their speaker engagements. They can't keep selling their books. They can't keep doing these conventions even because people will start showing up to heckle the people there, like with what Ryan Gable did at Contact in the Desert last year.
Okay. Well, that kind of segue to my next. Go ahead.
Like I said, that's why I'm just sitting here going, I don't want to expose anybody because they believed in aliens. This recent stuff with Through the Stars Academy and Elizondo and Lazar, it's all very sensitive topics for people that have very much, put everything into the story, and they'll fight it tooth and nail.
There's a lot of true believers, and I think one of the main ways that it was funded is when Ravisavi sold his main interest in Gaia for it was hundreds, it was 100 million plus, somewhere around there. And then that's when they rebranded it to Gaia and did focus on specifically for digital content streaming. It was either 2015 or 2016 when that happens. And Rasavi is still the CEO of Gaia Television.
Right.
So there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money tied into this. There's sponsors and people that are involved in conferences. This There's a lot. Some of his own money. Rasavi's money tied into it as well. There's a lot of money. The contact in the desert, conferences that they have. There's a lot of money tied into this UFO culture. And when people start getting called out, like Lee was mentioning, it threatens that money. It threatens that financial generation just from that alone. We're not talking about the people that are out there spreading disinfo either willingly or unwillingly. People have true believer syndromes where they really believe certain things about their lives or about others. Laura Eisenhower, becoming an example of, going out there and, her claiming without substantial evidence outside of that camp that she's Dwight D. Eisenhower's granddaughter. So there's a lot of money that people have given and bought and invested into this. And there's some vested interests that don't want to see that money dry up, right, Lee? Would that be the right way of saying it?
Very much so. And like I said, that's why some of the questions that I've been trying to bring up and discuss with other podcasters out there that are very into this narrative has been getting such, I think, vitriol would be a good way to explain it. There's this whole issue with the Edge of Wonder, Fulong Gong, Epic Time stuff. And like I said, that's what I'm saying. I don't want to see this stuff being escalated any more than it already is, especially with what's going on out in the world right now with all the riots and stuff. So trying to explain to people that, hey, I'm sorry these people are connected to multi-channel networks, maybe a good way to say it. Or multi-level marketing companies, actually, would probably be a better way to say it. And so when the stuff with the Uranium One and what Neil Sanders uncovered, like I said, Neil's a friend of mine. I really, really enjoy his work and what he's brought forth. But like I said, I was like going, okay, the Bundy Ranch, Yellow Cake, Rat Lines, what's really going on behind the scenes here? And so like I said, me just trying to ask questions was getting friends of mine coming at me kind of weird. And so, like I said, that's why I'm sitting here just trying to understand myself what's going on with these people and why the lawsuit was dropped and what's really going on. And I know because people have been telling me behind the scenes that, they're separating this stuff from that snafu that happened a couple of years ago. And since there were some other people involved, Roger Ramzur, Joy Jackson, and all that stuff with something called Doxgate right now, what's going on. It's a very contentious subject to talk about because real people were doxxed, like my friend Dr. Joe. Everyone calls him Joe from the Carolinas. And so that's what I'm saying. My friends were involved in this stuff very heavily 3 years ago. They started, just like this, doing regular podcasts and going on other YouTube channels and just discussing this stuff. And like this, by them doing that, they started getting death threats in the emails. And they would go, like I said, everybody I know pretty much that were getting the death threats have already reported this stuff to the FBI. And supposedly there's been rumors of a RICO case involved with this stuff. But no one's been arrested yet. So I'm still very curious what's going on.
Lori Eisenhower was Dwight D. Eisenhower's great-granddaughter, supposedly. Not granddaughter. I want to correct that. I was thinking about that. I was like, wait a minute. I think it was great-granddaughter. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of money and a lot of people's reputation tied up in all this.
Yeah, and you got to remember, Eisenhower and Brooks Agnew and all them, they're the people that think that there's a hollow earth entrance in Antarctica with a pyramid there.
Oh, wow. That is certainly rather ominous, to put it mildly. But okay, so two other individuals that you brought up to me, I know you just mentioned them before, were Ryan Gable and Kev Baker. Could you, Lee, explain their role in all of this to the listeners, please?
Oh, me and Kev Baker go back years, just through Popeye Dirth and Liam Schiff. And so when Ryan Gable was at Contact in the Desert last year, he just walked up to Jordan Sather and was just asking him some questions. And Jordan Sather did his, oh, you're da-da-da-da. So after that, Kev interviewed him and did a really good interview. And then he's been on with Jimmy Church and other people. So I really respect what Ryan's done and speaking out against these people who are pushing the MMS leech cure for autism that they've been pushing.
So another question that had occurred to me, I'm just kind of curious, does any of this link up also to, the whole transcendental meditation movement and what have you? I know I just looked into that a little bit and was really rather shocked to find that there was a foundation behind all of that that had hundreds of millions of dollars at its disposal. I was just kind of curious. It seems like a lot of the TM types tend to travel in these same types of circles. Have you guys seen any connections to that as well, possibly?
Yes,
Okay.
it's called the Human Potential Movement and the New Age Transcendental Meditation Movement together, actually.
Okay.
And
So
all of
this.
that has to do with a lot of the research I've been doing these last 5 years, having to do with Echelon Institute
Hmm.
and Timothy Leary, actually. And that
So
whole
And Gaia
uh,
pushing transcendental meditation too as well. They've done for years, and they still do. There's no
yeah,
difference.
that's yeah. I mean, because a lot of this stuff definitely kind of emerged in back in the '70s, or I mean, I suppose it was around prior to that, but I mean, it was kind of all linked together around the 1970s, and then kind of was disoriented a bit during the Reagan years, but certainly seems like it's come back with a vengeance now. But let's get into the whole aspect of the secret right, because I mean, this is what's really interesting to me about all of this. So, do we want to separate this from the QAnon thing first, or do you want to just try to all tackle it at once, essentially?
Now we keep it separate. That's important to do so.
Okay.
So yeah, like I said earlier, the biggest connections that I've seen between Gaia TV and that whole nexus, George Norrie, for example, being a big part of pushing them forward and pushing, having many people within the Secret Right, or not within the Secret Right, well, within the Secret Right, but also within Gaia TV on Coast to Coast AM. Like I mentioned earlier, David Wilcox has been on Coast to Coast AM quite numerous amount of times. Um, I think I want to say Corey Goode has too as well. Um, I believe so. Let me look that up. But I know Wilcox has quite a lot. But Josh Reeves, yeah, Corey Goode has as well. So Josh Reeves has exposed Coast to Coast AM, especially through George Norrie and later through Caravan to Midnight, John B. Wells, of them, putting a lot of the CMP type people on frequently, like Alex Jones, Joel Skousen, Albert Stubblevine.
Hmm.
There's more. I can't think of them offhand.
John Alexander, I'm guessing, would have made the rounds too.
Yes. And putting them forward, and then also putting forward David Wilcox and Corey Goode, and pushing them, giving them, because Coast to Coast AM is like the largest platform, or one of the largest platforms for conspiracy in the world at this point. I mean, they've been around forever. I used to listen to them with my father back when Art Bell, and I used to listen to Ian Punnett. I liked Ian Punnett a lot. He actually interviewed Dean Koontz once, or actually twice. But they're putting them, forward to the world. They're like, hey, these people are legit. They're giving them a platform. They're pushing people to Gaia. They're also, pushing CMP people as well. And you also see that too with John B. Wells, who came out of Coast to Coast AM. Him pushing forth people that have that same agenda and that same CMP nexus as well. So it does seem like, I mean, you've written about it on your blog, Vice of View, of how the right wing seems to have some sort of fascination with mysticism, the New Age movement, and UFO cults for a long time. I mean, the Regneries were publishing books on UFOlogy, so it's no different here. I mean, the MAPS Institute got a majority of its funding from George W. Bush, H.W. Bush's administration, and Republicans seem to really like to push psychedelics, which you think they wouldn't. Think they would be against drug use and the war on drugs. So it's kind of like this strange bedfellow between these people who claim to be evangelical Christians that represent, conservatism and the CMP but not all of them. But a lot of them are in bed with the New Agers and the UFO, pushing forth the UFO agenda too as well, and the deep space research type agendas that you wouldn't think that they would be. You think that would be antagonistic to their beliefs, but it's out there. So yeah, and like I said, Jay Weidner used to go on Jeff Rent's show quite frequently, and Rentz himself have had many CMP guests throughout the years. Alex Jones and Rentz used to be on GCN Network together before Rentz started saying some unsavory things about Alex Jones's wife, and he got booted off GCN. Joel Skousen's been on there a lot. So you kind of start seeing the same people going on these, multi-channel networks, I guess as Lee would put it, or at least promoting one another on these platforms and give them platform boosting to give them legitimacy. So it happens a lot within that nexus. I mean, that's how they keep propping this stuff up, because it makes so much money. They keep putting them in these different on these different networks or in these different groups, and you see that quite frequently. Do you have anything to add on that, Lee, or anything? Did I misrepresent anything that you can think of?
No, once again, this is why I really enjoyed us and what we've been doing the last 6 months together, because we see this from such different perspectives here. Now, we'll always respect Josh Reeves and the Secret Right stuff and the work that's been coming out there. But when people forget how far back this really goes and how many different people are involved with pushing the clonings and different narratives out there, that it's just really good to take a second and remember that there are people out there that do believe in the deep underground military bases, that whole stuff that came out with Phil Schneider and Bill Wilson. And so, in looking back and remembering that, with Alex Jones comes Mark Dice. And that whole Illuminati confirmed stuff that is very mixed into this narrative is why I really like discussing this the way we have, and the fact that you're always like the good cop in the situation, and I can come along behind you and be like, don't forget about the channeling chanters and our friends that, while we don't disagree with some of the stuff they put out, we disagree with some of the stuff they put out. And until a lot of people start working together to expose this stuff, it's going to be dog eat dog world, one person throwing the other person under the bus, because all they're trying to do is get up that pecking chain to become a speaker at one of these conferences.
And then they're going modern day, pushing the Q phenomenon. Are they not, Lee, with David Wilcox, Corey Goode, Jordan Sather? They're talking about praying medic. Some of them, not all of them are pushing New Age or in line with Gaia TV.
In the Matrix, Shady Grove, and Out of Shadows with their documentary coming out, and now the lawsuit with Tiffany Fitzhenry, we'll have to wait to see how that plays out.
So let's segue into the QAnon thing now. So let's specifically go into the connections to all this with QAnon, because this seems like it's a really fascinating topic. Lee, do you want to start off on that?
Oh, sure. Back 3-4 years ago, I heard about these people talking about this stuff with this, we do call it the QAnon phenomenon or the QAnon conspiracy. And there was a person named Pamphlet, Baruch the Scribe, and Tracy Beans, who started doing interviews together on a YouTube channel known as Patriot Soapbox. They're still active to this day. And they started talking about these cicada games and cyber ARGs, NPCs, LRPs, LARPing, and that kind of stuff. And then other people started picking up. They made these Q deltas. And then the Tyler and White Rabbit stuff came into play. And so a lot of people started going down different rabbit holes, looking into all these different conspiracy theories that were tied into MK Ultra, Operation Paperclip, something called Operation Looking Glass, where, like I said, they believe that, the CIA was working in Montauk in the Philadelphia experiment to be able to look into the future and predict things, and now everyone's trying to stop this World War III from happening or other different very fearful stuff. So 2 years ago, Unirock tried to expose all this stuff, and it come to be known that people started running around behind his back accusing him of stolen valor when he's not. And so that's when I really was like, okay, these people are not going to stop doing what they do. And so that's when Jerome Corsi and another guy named Jason Goodman and Quinn Michaels and all this other craziness just started happening. And things got very complicated a year ago. There's some lawsuits coming up on August 11th that is dealing with this stuff. So I'm very much looking forward to hopefully going to this court case and being able to interview a few people involved in this stuff because, like I've said before, I'm confused on what is going on with these people and what they're trying to accomplish. Are they trying to expose people for cyber stalking and gang stalking people, or are they just having fun trying to get a joke off or something? And a lot of people don't realize that with the Gambino crime lord getting killed, there was the guy who attacked the Sedona church.
The El Paso shooting.
The El Paso shooting right there. There was also
Jessica Prim, the stripper that went to the ship off the coast of New York to save the mole kids.
Right. So like that's where I was like going, okay, this can't get any crazier. And then the guy named Thomas Schwartenberger got served kind of yesterday or the other day. And that's triggered a bunch of people recently. So I'm glad to see this stuff happening. I hate that so many people are getting triggered and making hours upon hours of video trying to expose these group of 5 or 6 people that were all connected together, trying, like this, they admit to LARPing. That's what they do admit to. So to them to be like, okay, where are you separating the LARP from reality at this point is where a ton of people have a ton of questions. And so I do hope a lot of people don't attack these people for these questions, but these people do need to answer the questions and come clean about some of this stuff, or more people are going to get hurt.
No, absolutely.
And some of the people that started the QAnon movement were patriots that had good intentions. But a lot of it turned into bad blood and infighting and grifting and you had people that joined in like Jay-Z Knight, who used to be part of Gaia TV herself. Lee had discussed her earlier. She ran the School, not School of Enlightenment. The Rantha School of Enlightenment, where she would channel Rantha, and she has ties to the Gashara, Nasara movement. Have you ever heard of those, Recluse?
How is it spelled?
Nesara. Nasara and Gasara. Okay, so Nasara was a National Economic Security Recovery Act that was put forth by a gentleman named Harvey Barnard. Okay, and what it was pretty much a way to replace the income tax with like a national sales tax. All right.
Okay.
So he had good intentions. Harvey Barnard was. He was just a guy. He was an engineer and consultant and a teacher who just made like this economic platform. And the title of his book was called Draining the Swamp, ironically enough. Monetary and Fiscal Policy Reforms during the 1990s. So this woman called Shani Godwin, also known as the Dove of Oneness, who Dove of Oneness was actually promoted by Jeff Rentz in the early 2000s. They kind of came up with this belief that there was a white hat group run by General Joseph Dunford. Oh, imagine that. QAnon is very much similar to that today, right? That was going to put this...
Dunford was the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, correct, or no?
Yes, and they've always made Dunford as the leader of the white hats, whether it is QAnon or it was the stuff that was going on during Godwin term back in the 1990s. Okay? Now, these are two separate movements. I am not lumping them together and say this is a continuation. I used to, but I was incorrect about that. But I will say that they are very similar, and some people that were in both of these time periods, like Jay-Z Knight, for example, who runs the Rantho School of Enlightenment, she may have brought this information or try to, re-push it as GASARA, which is just a global Economic Security and Recovery Act. Go ahead, Lee. I'm sorry.
Clues, you might know this better as a global currency reset.
Yes.
With the new Gold Standard Act. This isn't, like I said, there is still a huge following of that.
Yes, there is.
It goes into the sovereign citizen movement without, what's her name, April Lejeune, and all those people. Like I said, and it's weird how that stuff ties back into that stuff with Timothy Homseth and Phil McConnell with them. So yeah, this stuff is all connected. People can try to deny it, but it's pretty easy to make the connections if you stick around long enough.
No, that is definitely very interesting. Can you get in a little more to the stuff with Dunford? Because he's been a guy kind of on my radar for a while, especially since I believe he's also a Roman Catholic, correct?
The only thing about Dunford that I know of as far as this is concerned, Recluse, is that they've always used General Joseph Dunford as the White Hat. General. It hasn't changed back in the 90s, and it is today in QAnon. He's always been the White Hat.
So he was all the way back in the 90s, then they were kind of promoting this guy as the White Hat, so to speak.
Yes, he was a leader of the White Hat generals back then during the 1990s that were going to retake the country from Clinton. And they actually even used cloning back then. They said Janet Reno was helping Congress. And actually back then Nancy Pelosi was a good person too as well. I have a video of it on my channel where she was fighting to get the Nassar legislation passed through Congress. And it was supposed to go in effect on September 10th, September 11, 2011, should I say. And because of the World Trade Center bombing, planes running into them, blowing up, 9/11, it did not go into effect. But Dunford was the leader of, Joseph Dunford was supposedly the leader of the White Hat militaries, members that were going to retake the country back then. And he's part of the QAnon White Hat and those circles now too as well. It hasn't changed. And the Dove of Oneness, Shani Godwin. Well, yeah, it changed some, but it didn't change in that regard, though.
Oh, yes, it did.
Oh, how so? How am I wrong about that?
Well, do you know the difference between the white hats and the blue hats?
No, go ahead. You got me there.
Okay, they're just, like I said, it's the blue hats, the white hats, that whole UN stuff that was happening with the Syrian gas stuff and false propaganda.
Oh, the blue helmets. Yeah, you're right. And the white helmets.
So, right. So there's that stuff, but that isn't the same stuff as, have you ever heard of the white dragon family and the red dragon family?
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
Supposedly the white dragon family runs America and the red dragon family runs Hong Kong and China. I don't really understand it either. It's crazy conspiracy theory stuff that goes back to John Lamb Lash and UFO alien cult stuff. But I have a lot of friends that believe in that stuff, so I respect their beliefs. And that's why I says, that's what I'm sitting going, if you don't understand that there's this whole white hat versus the Nazi Mao Reds, you might be picking a side of a YouTube beef that doesn't really exist.
Who was the modern guy that pushed the Dragon Society, the White Dragon Society, the White Dragon Family, and who was it? We used to talk about him all the time. He's pushing to this nexus too as well. Benjamin Fulford.
There you go. Thank you.
Yes. Do you remember Benjamin Fulford? I used to watch him years ago and saw him pop up on Godlike Productions a lot. Do you remember Benjamin Fulford and his whole White Dragon Society, White Dragon Family? That they were the white hats that were going to save the country. Recluse, do you remember that?
Not off the top of my head. Can you guys get into that?
Yeah, they were just the beneficiary Chinese family of kind of like Chinese families have come together that want to save the world and take the world away from the Red Dragon Society or the Red Dragon Family, which is more like it's more communist versus anti-communism type rhetoric again. We're close.
Actually, there's a certain particular family involved if you follow the 13 bloodline stuff. And it's kind of funny because it's the Li family, L-I, out of China.
Okay.
Yeah, but you see that a lot. So, but yeah, the Dove of Oneness, Shani Godwin used to be well known at the Ramtha School of Enlightenment when she was running those monetary schemes to sell what they call Omega bonds through the Omega scam with Clyde Hood, and to sell Iraqi dinar. They were going to be reevaluated through Nasara. So people, whoever had Iraqi dinar would end up being wealthy, and during the currency reevaluation. And that was supposed to happen. And Jay-Z Knight knew about it, and just like Jay-Z Knight, worked with Gaia, and went over to start being pro Q and having in the Matrix and Shady Grove come speak to the Ramtha School of Enlightenment and do their own little program there. What were we gonna say, Lee?
Oh, you're forgetting just a couple of names now.
Okay, go ahead. I want to make sure.
Roseanne Barr.
Yep, Roseanne Barr.
Dietrich, Leo Zangami. Rabbit hole is deep, my friend.
All those people have connections to Jay-Z Knight. Yeah, Roseanne Barr is a personal friend of Jay-Z Knight's.
That's interesting, especially in light of her meltdown just a couple of years ago as well.
But yeah, Jay-Z Knight definitely is. I talked about her extensively on a show on Q that I did on the Infinite Fringe with Billy Ray Valentine, and she definitely grifts when she can put herself in some sort of movement that's making money. With a lot of truthers or a lot of the woo-woo type people, Jay-Z Knight's there for sure. So.
Now, Lee, I wanted to get back to something that you had mentioned a little bit earlier. You had brought up the Gambino crime lord I'm assuming you mean the one that had been killed by the Trump follower, right? Or was it a Trump or a QAnon follower, or a combination of both?
He was a Q. He was a Q person.
Okay. And so do you think that was also sort of tied into what we're getting at here with Gaia, or was this more of just like a Q thing, essentially?
Oh, he was totally just a Q thing, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was QAnon. It's when QAnon kind of radicalizes people like Anthony Carmelo. I think it was the Gambino crime boss shooter name of who did it. But yeah, him. Jessica Prim, driving out to the ship that was off of, I think it was the USS Comfort, I think, that was off of New York City to save the mole kids. You have a lot of people who buy into this QAnon movement, and very sadly, some of them are they have mental issues, and it triggers them, and it ends up radicalizing them, and it ends up causing problems.
No, I mean, that definitely... Oh, go ahead, John.
You see that a lot. I mean, you even see that in the white nationalist movements, too, as well. And even, I guess you could say, the black nationalists, too, also. Any type of radicalization like that is going to push someone, mentally unstable people to their limits. So, yeah, I mean, you see that with the QAnon. Some people, it's, most people that believe in QAnon are just patriots who want better for the country, and they've been duped, and they give up their money to these people. But some people, they go off the deep end when they start breathing in those really radical conspiracy theories like underground adrenochromes and mole kids and sex slave farms underneath the Getty Museum, and children and everything, stuff that's can't be proven at all. Recluse, some people start believing in it. If they've gone off the deep end, they'll do something about it, and they'll trigger them. It happens a lot, doesn't it, Lee?
Very much so. That brings up Bucky Wolf and James Wolf. Another person who started following these people on YouTube, and he ended up stabbing his brother in the head with a sword because he thought his brother was possessed by a demon lizard person.
Was this a QAnon guy, or was this somebody saw David Icke or something?
Working like a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is something that John and I talked about in an earlier show with my research assistant Keith Allen Dennis. I mean, essentially, it seems like we're seeing just a full-blown weaponization of conspiracy culture, but especially in the last year or two. With this just, massive rash of violence that's been inspired by a lot of this stuff. Lee, is that kind of the sense that you're getting as well? It kind of seems like that's what you've been hinting at.
Very much so. There's a name for it now, actually. Cancel culture.
Cancer culture. Okay, that is a very good description of it.
And like I says, it just to bring up a different topic, but it might relate here a little bit. Do you remember that high school kid up in Washington D.C. that went to that rally protest thing, and the Native American veteran guy, I think his name was Nathan. Like I said, it's CNN, and like I said, they watched him
Yeah.
walk up to that kid. Like I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
The Covington case.
thank you. And like I said, that's why this is reminding me of that, because a lot of what they didn't show was what happened prior to the Native American walking up to that kid was the incident between the Native American and the Black Hebrew Israelite group, which kind of instigated this stuff. So that's why the kid sued CNN and won. So that's how far this, they call it Mockingbird media. And, like I said, that's the only thing on is it triggering people to become radicalized so they can install martial law? Is this whole COVID-19 a bioweapon to instill fear, to get people to get RFID chips injected to them through different organizations out there? Is this all a part of the Agenda 21 stuff? And so many people out there believe it is. So they live in that constant fear.
No,
And
I
it's
mean,
just, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, I mean, that definitely seems very much, I mean, the case of just what we're getting into. And I mean, to me, this is all especially ominous when we sort of pull back and look at kind of the historical perspective of a lot of this. Because, I mean, really, a lot of this kind of Gaia stuff that we've been talking about ultimately goes back to the Theosophical Society of the late 19th century, which is where you really get a lot of the hidden masters and the introduction of meditation and Eastern beliefs into Western culture, along with Western esotericism being combined with it and what have you. And I mean, it really did spread like wildfire in a sense. France, it kind of comes into synarchy, which would eventually underpin the Goode and some of the other reactionary groups that started to emerge in the 1920s and the 1930s. In Germany, it would be a major influence in Ariosophy, which would ultimately lead to the rise of the Thule Society and the Nazi Party and so forth. And even through its incorporation into Martinism and the concept of synarchy into Martinism, it spread to Russia and potentially also underpined the rise of the Bolsheviks as well. And the end result, when all of these forces kind of came together, was just a horrendous period of wars. The two world wars, obviously, that left just millions and millions of people dead, and really fundamentally reoriented our society. This made Theosophy really rather toxic after the Second World War, which led to essentially it being rebranded as the New Age community in the late 50s, the early 1960s. Fortunately, pardon me, Lee, you want to add something to that?
Well, you're talking about Lucius Publishing.
Yeah, Lucius Publishing was definitely one of the aspects of that. What was it, like in the 20s or something when it was set up?
Yeah, I think Alice A. Bailey did that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, correct.
And a lot of that stuff was also in the United States actually spread by William Dudley Paley, which has usually been kind of conveniently exercised. And of course, he would go on to found the Silver Shirts, the fascist movement in the 1930s here. And he was inspired to do so because he believed that the Lord Maitreya, that Bailey, I believe, was the one who had promoted, had reincarnated on Earth to be the great teacher, whatever, of this particular era, and his name was Adolf Hitler. Anyway, that eventually led Paley to being thrown in prison for sedition during the 1940s. When he got back out in 1950, he was prohibited from talking politics, but he jumped wholesale into the UFO movement and would certainly have a influence on that has also been greatly neglected. I mean, all this stuff, this rebranded Theosophy really reemerges as the New Age community in the 60s. Uh, Again, setting out to bring
You're
forth.
really hitting a nail on the head right now, by the way.
Okay, okay. Well, I'm glad you're digging it, man. But I'm gonna open up to you guys in a second. We had this whole thing going into the 60s and 70s, and instead of this new golden age, we got Dominionism, we got Thatcherism, we got Reaganism, and now it's coming back again, and it looks like we've got another catastrophe looming. So, Lee, do you want to add into that now?
Oh, just thank you for everything you just said, because it was really on point. The whole Buddha Maitreya stuff, more current from the 60s was that Benjamin Creme person with the whole source. incorporated stuff. So, like I says, yeah, it very much happened. There was a lot of people that really followed that New Age theosophy, human potential, the kind of Jesus, this Maitreya person, and like I said, I'm just kind of sitting here a little mind blown from what you just said, because when these people started blending this stuff together, and back to people falsely accusing certain other people of being Luciferian or Satanists. That's what I dropped the lawsuit, because the person who did that made a public apology. But then after that happened was the stuff with this person named Aquino.
Yeah. You mean Colonel Michael Aquino?
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. And I do believe the guy he wrote that book with is now doing a deep dive into QAnon. So it's, right. Thank you, John. So that's why it's almost weird to explain to people. This has almost become a living story that people are following in real time.
And it's especially ominous because, I mean, the backgrounds of Valley and Kino, I mean, these guys were purely in psychological warfare as well, which is certainly, I mean, I think this really puts a major spin on that. And that's really something I've tried to emphasize in my own research on the emergence of the UFO movement, and also really the kind of modern conspiracy movement that derived from the John Birch Society and so forth. I mean, all this stuff really goes back to the American Security Council. And the thing about the American Security Council, there was an attempt to apply the techniques of MK Ultra to psychological warfare through the American Security Council, and specifically it was this emphasis on trauma to reorient society. This is something that Naomi Klein kind of got into with the shock doctrine, but the ASC had predated this. They came up with just this horrendous, conspiracy culture, this toxic culture with the John Birch Society that's been continued by Alex Jones. But they also pumped the especially negative UFO context, where essentially the aliens are here to invade us and enslave us. And it just seems like it was a method to keep people in a perpetual state of agitation and be traumatized. And I think that's something, Lee, you've been kind of leaning towards or alluding to throughout this interview. Would I be mistaken in saying that?
Not at all.
No.
I do believe recent things with Joe Biden doing an interview with Charlemagne the God, and what was discussed on there with the 3-strike rule with Bill Clinton and them was very important. I'm glad those discussions are actually starting to be had. The whole using the Black Lives Matter issue to instill racial tension isn't something I disagree with anymore, especially with what just happened with Floyd and the officer finally being arrested today. And the other, I do believe they charged the other officers. So, like I says, that's it, to me, this problem goes back 200 years. Really, it does. And people have avoided this conversation for long enough. It doesn't need to be avoided anymore. We're strong enough to know the truth. If the Navy wants to come out and discuss more about the TikTok video and what it really is, I would love to hear anyone with credible information to come forward. But there's a lot of people wanting that information to come forward now. And like I said, that has nothing to do with the Gaia stuff. That's through the Stars Academy and the ATIB program stuff. But getting back to what we were just discussing a minute ago, a lot of people don't understand that trauma-based mind control was studied. It might not be trauma-based mind control anymore. It just might be very basic social engineering and behavior modification being used through mass media.
Well, that was really the point of Cambridge Analytica, effectively. I mean, it really did also try to emphasize this just really traumatic, news feed and what have you in your social media, the kind of stuff that would agitate and incite voters. So, yeah, I mean, that's very much the case, I think, what we're seeing now. And certainly, it's been taken into the digital age now with the SCL group, with Cambridge Analytica. And, I mean, it is truly a brave new world at this point.
Yeah, that whole stuff with that. Sorry.
Go ahead, Lee. Go ahead, Lee, and I'll go after you. Go
ahead. Yeah, because that stuff with that Fusion GPS, Uranium One, Cambridge Analytics, going back all the way to the Bundy Ranch standoff with Lavoy Finicum stuff, still bothers me to this day. And like I said, that's what I'm sitting going. Americans don't want to be oppressed. Americans want their freedom of speech. But there's a huge group of these Second Amendment rights people out there right now that are really upset with what's been going on this last year. And so, I don't want to say this is going to be the summer of the Q rebellion. Or I don't even know what to say with what's going on right now.
You're not the only one who's speechless right now either,
yeah, especially with, Major General Paulie Vallely coming out and saying, QAnon is a group of military intelligence specialists of over 800 people that advise the President of the United States. It's like, yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why, like I said, is if these people, I don't want to name names because I don't think half these people realize what's going on, but they need to start de-escalating the situation, or things are going to get worse.
Well, I mean, it does kind of beg the question: is this ultimately, leading to a long-term agenda of martial law? I mean, that is just something that I'm really terrified about. We're seeing this COG protocols going into action right now. And with the continued escalation of things that are going on. And I mean, in some cases, Trump himself is really promoting this. I mean, just look at his advocacy for these armed protests in Michigan and that type of thing. I mean, it is very much a powder keg right now.
Yeah, that whole miracle pillow snafu that happened with him and all that stuff is really crazy. So you're just reconfirming the questions I already have.
Yeah. Oh. I mean, we all have these questions now. Well, do you guys have anything else to add here before we wrap up?
Just
John?
Just try, your best, because there seems like they're escalating things more and more out there and pushing the tensions between different groups to the full force they possibly can, divide and conquer more than ever. The tension between the races, tension between political ideologies, tension, that ends up leading between tension between family members and neighbors and friends to cause much of division as they possibly can. Now, to what end that may be, I have no idea. But we got to do our best to try to, overcome these things when we can, with our family, with our friends, with our, neighbors, especially with everything that's going on, and try to forgive when we can, when the person is receptive to that, and try to make amends. Because this is I hate to use Huxley, but some brave new world that I haven't seen since I've been alive, and I don't think you guys have either. The stuff that's happened this year has been insane. Maybe since 9/11, but I think this even trumps 9/11 at this point.
Yeah, I don't think we've really seen anything like this since the 1930s, which obviously none of us were alive for.
Yeah, so just do your best. I mean, if you have disagreements over social media or whatever with your friends and family or people that you confide in, try to call them up on the phone and try to talk of these things and try to hash these things out, because right now they are sowing and trying to make more division than I've seen in a long time, whether it's COVID-19, whether it's the atrocity that happened in Minneapolis, whether it's any of that. They are trying to sow division between people. And what's sad is it looks like that they are succeeding, with, a certain amount of percentage of it. You're going to have disinformation. You're going to have operations run. You're going to have agent provocateurs. This is the age of information, and with it comes a lot of bullcrap information too that you have to use discernment to sift through, and a lot of people don't have. I'm not saying everyone here on this call gets it right 100% of the time, but there is a lot of BS out there, and a lot of that BS is radicalizing people. I would say even worse than a lot of the radicalization and the implants with government groups and agents during the 1990s and the whole militia movement during that time period. You're seeing it now, but instead of within militias, it's within complete society at this point. Yeah. It's something else. It truly is.
Truly. Lee, did you have anything that you wanted to add to before we wrap up?
Thank you for this discussion. It's been amazing. Love the facts that you all have brought forward. I really appreciate how sharp John is on his information, and you. Yeah, I'm same in the same boat with John, but I'm just not as nice about it, I guess. I will always be the optimist, but I'm not going to curb my tongue for people's feelings right now. If
Yeah,
you're in that boat with the resistance is futile, you need to wear the mask and live in fear and trust the government. I'll talk with you about it, but at this point, I'm gonna still, even though I'm kind of a, a person that like to look at everything from every perspective, I'm still going to respect, the police and that, basically in-state government's not a negative thing, you know. And so right now with the things being the way they are, like just too many people are jumping into these conspiracy theory YouTube channels and donating to them and jumping on these Patreons, and they don't see themselves going down these rabbit holes. So thank you for this discussion, and I hope a lot of people see that we're not trying to be contentious. We're not trying to disagree with the alien agenda. And we're not saying that aliens don't exist. We just don't agree with some of these other people's perspectives and what they're putting out. So I very much appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
absolutely. And I mean, I think what it really goes down to is, I mean, we all need to kind of step back when it comes to this, this massive conspiracy culture. And we need to go back and look at, where it originated from, who was behind it, and what they were thinking it was going to become ultimately. And, in saying that, I'm not trying to say that, there aren't conspiracies or anything to that effect. I think everybody in this, chat knows that there are. But there's also a lot of disinformation that's been mixed in. And this, kind of a prior chat that we had with my research assistant, Keith Allen Dennis, this is ultimately what separates conspiracy theories from parapolitical research. The latter is a detached, emotionless pursuit that tries to look through primary and secondary source material for pattern recognition and legitimate speculation, not something that's just basically based on a guy said that, the elites were all green aliens with blue blood or something to that effect. And until we start embracing the latter and moving beyond the former, we are going to continue being pawns in the game, no matter how many rabbit holes you believe that you have gone down. Because there's a hall of mirrors everywhere, folks, and you've got to be aware of that. And with that thought, I'm going to wrap things up for now. So, all of you listeners out there, do stay tuned till next time. We've got more great shows coming forward. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.